began with a phone call. Just one call, made at midnight, that changed everything. On the evening of May 14th, 2016, in a quiet town tucked deep into the rolling hills of Vermont, 27-year-old Kasha Morrow picked up her phone for the last time. The recipient of that call never came forward, and Kasha herself was never seen alive again. Her disappearance wasn't like the others. There was no forced entry, no frantic 911 call, no trail of blood or broken glass, just an unfinished life. Clothes left folded on a chair, a cup of tea cooling on the kitchen counter, and her phone, screen shattered, discarded in the woods a mile away. But that final call she made, right at midnight, was the single thread investigators clung to. Who was on the other end of the line? Why did they never step forward? And could the answer to that mystery unravel the fate of Kasha Morrow? By the end of this story, you'll hear the chilling details investigators uncovered, the journal entries, the disturbing witness accounts, the revelations about Kasha's private life that left even her closest friends reeling. And you'll be left with the same haunting question. Was Kasha's disappearance the work of a stranger, or was her final call to someone she trusted most? This is the story of the last phone call, Secrets at Midnight. To understand the weight of this case, we have to step back and look at who Kasha Morrow really was. Kasha was 27, a young woman whose name wasn't widely known outside her small town, but whose life carried the kind of quiet complexity that people would only begin to unravel after she vanished. Born in Montreal, she moved to Vermont with her father when she was 11, after her mother's sudden death. Friends remembered her as serious yet warm, the kind of person who would write poetry in the margins of her notebooks, but also bake pies for her neighbors in the fall. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't reckless. Kasha was careful, almost too careful, some would later say. By 2016, she lived alone in a modest, two-story home at the edge of town. She worked part-time at a local library and part-time as a freelance translator, taking on projects in French and English for companies she never met in person. It was quiet work, perfectly suited to her quiet life. But beneath that surface, Kasha carried shadows. She was known to avoid large gatherings, rarely dated, and seemed to always keep people at arm's length. Some chalked it up to losing her mother so young. Others believed it was something more. Her neighbors remembered how she never let visitors inside her home. She would step outside, closing the door quickly behind her, no matter who came knocking. One neighbor remarked, it was like she was hiding something. But what could a girl like her possibly be hiding? And yet, despite her withdrawn tendencies, she left an impression on everyone who met her. Her closest friend, Helena, said Kasha was the kind of person you could tell a secret to and know it would stay locked away forever. And that very quality, the ability to keep secrets, would later become one of the most haunting aspects of her case. Because when Kasha disappeared, investigators realized she had been keeping more than just one. The night she vanished, the town's clock tower chimed midnight. That was when Kasha dialed her last call. But to this day, no one knows who picked up, or if anyone did at all. The mystery of that midnight call transformed a quiet missing persons report into one of the most talked about unsolved cases in the region. The press descended. Headlines screamed, "Young woman vanishes after mysterious midnight call." Candlelight vigils were held in front of the library where she worked. The story reached beyond Vermont, into New York, Boston, even across the border into Canada. Everyone wanted to know, Who was on the other end of Kasia Moreau's phone that night? At first glance, her disappearance seemed impossible to explain. There was no forced entry, no sign of a struggle. But as investigators dug into her past, they began to uncover the kind of details that shook the town to its core. Because Kasia's life, quiet, private, almost invisible, wasn't nearly as simple as it appeared. And soon, they would discover that the people closest to her knew far less about her than they thought. But before we get there, let's go back to the beginning of the disappearance itself. The night Kasia Moreau's world stopped, and the town of Bellamy, Vermont, was changed forever. December 12th, 2016. It was a Monday night in Bellamy, Vermont. Cold, quiet. The kind of night when even the smallest sound carried down the empty streets. Neighbors later described the evening as uneventful. Christmas decorations blinked softly from porches. A light dusting of snow clung to driveways and roofs. The whole town seemed to be asleep by 10 o'clock. But not Kasia Moreau. Phone records show she made her last outgoing call at 11:58 p.m. That call lasted 37 seconds. The number she dialed? Untraceable. Investigators later confirmed it came from a prepaid burner phone, purchased earlier that week in a gas station 2 towns over. This was the first chilling detail in her disappearance, because Kasia didn't own a burner phone. In fact, friends said she barely used her cell at all, except to text her father or answer the occasional email notification. So why, on the night she vanished, would she reach for a phone no one knew existed? Police would later recover the device from her home, hidden inside the drawer of her bedside table. It contained just 3 numbers in its call history. 1 wrong number, 1 unanswered call, and the final one, the 37-second mystery. And then silence. Kasia was last seen alive earlier that evening by her neighbor, Mrs. Eckhart, who noticed her shoveling the walkway around 9:30 p.m. She described Kasia as bundled tightly in a gray coat, gloves, and a knit cap. Nothing seemed unusual. Kasia even waved politely before hurrying back inside. But by morning, her house was silent. No footprints in the fresh snow leading away from her front door. No tire marks in the drive. And when she failed to show up for her shift at the library, alarm bells began to ring. Her friend Helena, the one closest to her, was the first to notice something was wrong. She called repeatedly. No answer. By 3 p.m., Tuesday afternoon, Helena drove to Kasia's house herself. She knocked on the door. No reply. She tried the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, Helena found the house strangely pristine. Too pristine. There were no signs of a struggle. No broken glass. No overturned chairs. No blood. The kettle sat on the stove, full of water, untouched. A book lay open on the couch, as though Kasia had been reading moments before stepping away. But the most unnerving detail was upstairs. On the nightstand, next to the hidden burner phone, was a notebook Kasia had been keeping. Not a diary, not a journal, more like a logbook. The entries were short, clipped, written like bullet points rather than thoughts. December 8th. Car outside again, same place. December 9th. Noise in the yard, checked doors twice. December 11th. Phone rang, no one there. And finally, December 12th, just hours before she vanished. Tonight it ends. When Helena handed the notebook over to police, detectives felt a chill. Whatever Kasia meant by "tonight it ends," It was clear she knew something was coming. But here's where the case takes a darker turn. Investigators combed through her home, searching for evidence of forced entry, or clues pointing to where she might have gone. Nothing obvious emerged. Instead, they found absence. Her wallet was still in the drawer. Her glasses, which she wore constantly, were still on the table. Even her coat was hanging by the door, the same one Mrs. Eckhart had seen her wearing just hours earlier. If Kasia had left willingly, she hadn't dressed for the freezing weather, and if she hadn't left willingly, how had she been taken with no sign of struggle? The most unsettling clue came from her laptop. Police technicians discovered the hard drive had been wiped clean, not partially, entirely. Every file, every folder, every trace of her online activity had been erased within the 2 hours before her last call. For a woman who wasn't particularly tech-savvy, this was uncharacteristic and chilling. Because someone had gone to great lengths to make sure no one could see what Kasia had been working on before she disappeared. The evidence suggested two possibilities. Either Kasia erased everything herself, preparing for something she knew was coming, or someone else did it, and that someone was inside her home with her that night. By the end of the first 24 hours, police were faced with a case that was both baffling and terrifying. A young woman gone without a trace. A burner phone that shouldn't exist. A cryptic final entry. Tonight it ends. And a computer, scrubbed of secrets that might have explained everything. But as the investigation unfolded, one thing became clear. The mystery of Kasia Moreau wasn't about where she went. It was about what and who she had been running from. The early days of an investigation are often the most critical. Every hour matters. And in Kasia Moreau's case, the first 48 hours would reveal more questions than answers. Detectives began by retracing her final known movements. The library confirmed she clocked out at 7:04 p.m. On December 12th, surveillance footage showed her leaving the staff door alone, carrying a tote bag. She crossed a snowy lot and drove home in her old silver Honda. Nothing unusual. No one followed her car. No one lingered near the lot. But when police pulled traffic camera data, something strange appeared. At 7:22 p.m., just minutes after she left the library, her car was captured turning down Pine Hollow Road, the direct route home. And behind her another vehicle, a dark SUV. Its headlights deliberately dimmed, trailing just far enough back to avoid suspicion. The SUV never appeared on her street camera. It simply vanished. Neighbors were interviewed. Some remembered hearing an engine idling around 10 p.m., though no one saw who it belonged to. Others dismissed it as a snowplow. And then came the first real lead. Helena, her closest friend, told investigators about a man named Victor Armand, a new patron at the library. He'd shown up in late November, always asking for obscure books on encryption, surveillance, Cold War intelligence, books Kasia admitted made her uneasy. Helena recalled one particular evening when Victor had approached Kasia at the desk. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "You look like someone who understands secrets," he told her. Kasia laughed it off at the time, but Helena noticed she grew quieter afterward. She stopped walking to her car alone. She double-checked the doors at closing. Something about Victor had shaken her. When detectives tried to track him down, they discovered no one named Victor Armand lived in Bellamy or anywhere nearby. The address he'd given the library was fake. His phone number, disconnected. Whoever he was, he'd simply disappeared, just like Kasia. But the investigators were only beginning to peel back the layers of Kasia's life. Her father, a retired postmaster, told police his daughter had recently become obsessed with Old Town records. She'd asked him strange questions about Bellamy's abandoned properties, unmarked parcels of land, and forgotten water tunnels from the Prohibition era. She claimed she was working on a local history project, but when police searched her home for notes, they found only fragments, scribbles in the margins of her logbook. Parcel 44B. Tunnel access? Warren St. property? Detectives dug into the property files. One detail leapt out. Parcel 44B was owned by a shell company, registered under the name V. Armand Holdings. The town was shocked. Suddenly, Kasia's disappearance wasn't just about a young woman gone missing. It was tangled in something bigger, something buried in Bellamy itself. As police widened their net, they found another chilling discovery. A witness came forward, a teenager delivering newspapers on the night of December 12th. He swore he saw a figure standing in Kasia's yard around midnight. Tall man, dark coat, he recalled. He wasn't moving, just standing there, like he was waiting. The boy assumed it was Kasia talking to someone, until he noticed the porch light was off. She never opened the door. Whoever the man was, he was alone. By now, rumors were spreading like wildfire. Townsfolk whispered that Kasia had uncovered something she wasn't meant to. Some believed she'd staged her own disappearance, slipping away into a new life. Others were convinced she'd been silenced. But perhaps the most unsettling clue surfaced from the burner phone. Forensic technicians managed to recover a fragment of the erased data, a single audio file buried deep in the device's memory. It was only 12 seconds long, a woman's voice whispering, "They know, it's already too late." The voice was distorted, muffled, but experts confirmed it matched Kasia's speech patterns. The recording ended with a faint click, as if the phone had been placed gently on a table. This was the last trace of Kasia Morrow alive. For investigators, the implications were grim. She had either willingly recorded a warning, or someone had forced her to speak those words before silencing her for good. And yet, no body, no sign of violence, no proof of abduction, just silence, and the chilling sense that Kasia had walked straight into something no one in Bellamy understood. As winter dragged on, the investigation into Kasia Morrow's disappearance only grew stranger. Detectives focused on Victor Armand, or whoever he truly was. They traced the shell company that owned Parcel 44B, the abandoned stretch of land Kasia had been researching, on paper. It led to an offshore account, but deeper digging revealed something unsettling. The company had been quietly paying property taxes on several forgotten buildings in Bellamy. Old warehouses, a derelict school, places no one visited anymore. When investigators finally gained access to one of the warehouses, they discovered something unexpected. Inside, hidden beneath rotting tarps, were stacks of weathered crates. Many were empty, but in one, they found bundles of old surveillance tapes, grainy black and white footage of Bellamy streets, filmed decades earlier. The tapes had no labels, no explanation, but one recording stopped investigators cold. It showed Kasia's own street, her house visible in the background. The footage was from 1997, years before Kasia even lived there. Why had someone been filming her home before she ever moved in? Her father recalled something then. He told police Kasia had confided, not long before she vanished, that she felt as though her life wasn't entirely her own, as if someone had been keeping track of her long before she ever realized it. And then came the twist no one expected. A local historian came forward after reading about the case in the paper. He explained that the Morrow family home sat on land once owned by the Warren family, one of Bellamy's most influential dynasties in the early 1900s. Their fortune, he said, was tied not only to industry, but to something darker. Secret tunnels, smuggling operations, and rumors of experiments that townsfolk preferred not to remember. Was Cash's disappearance connected to this forgotten history, or was it merely coincidence? Then, the breakthrough investigators thought would end the mystery. A hiker found Cash's tote bag half buried in the woods, miles from town. Inside were library receipts, her ID, and a small notebook. The final page of the notebook was smeared with water damage, but 3 words were legible: "Watch the water." Some believed this meant she drowned, perhaps taken to the river by her abductor. Others thought it was symbolic, a final clue she left behind. But when divers searched the nearby waters, they found nothing. Cassia Morrow's body has never been recovered. The case remains open to this day. To some, she was a victim of obsession, targeted by a man who built an identity from shadows. To others, she uncovered something in Bellamy that someone was desperate to keep hidden. And still, others whisper that Cassia staged her own vanishing, that she stepped into the fog willingly, leaving behind fragments of herself like breadcrumbs for those desperate to follow. Whatever the truth may be, Cassia's story has become part of Bellamy's DNA. A reminder that sometimes the quietest places hide the loudest secrets, and sometimes the puzzles that haunt us most are the ones that will never be solved. So, what do you think happened to Cassia Morrow? Was she taken by someone she trusted? Did she uncover a truth too dangerous to share? Or was her disappearance the ultimate escape? Let me know your theories in the comments. If you found this case as haunting as I did, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime mysteries every day. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, not every story has an ending.